Welcome to Business Beyond Borders, the go-to podcast for CPA firms seeking transformative insights. I'm your host, Laurence Whittam, and with each episode we'll uncover key insights, best practices, and invaluable resources tailored for CPAs. From trending strategies to diving deep into outsourcing and offshoring, our experts will help in all areas of your business. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Business Beyond Borders. So I have a cool episode today with Abhilasha Parikh, who has a very interesting experience in terms of she's been part of a couple of very successful organizations when it comes to building their back office and their captives offshore. So she was from the grassroots level, from coming out of her own experience to working with these firms and really helping get their tax divisions off the ground, if I remember correctly, but also being one of the core initial team members in both these organizations, one of which being MBAF, that later got acquired into BDO, who now, if you look at it, BDO has put a huge amount of effort into growing out their back office, especially in India. Over the past few years, and they've made quite a mark in the Indian market when it comes to accessing accounting talent to support them. So, Abhilasha, nice to have you here, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Laurence. It's a pleasure.
And do you want to start off with maybe giving everybody just a little bit more of a in-depth background about yourself, your experience, what your roles were previously, and where you're at today?
Sure. So I started my career in US offshoring back in 2003. And that's when, if you remember, Shore Prep started their back offices in India. That was majorly for 1040s. That's when I kind of stepped into US taxation and accounting. I later joined MBAF. It was one of the first big firms to start their captive units in India. And I was one of the first employees. So we helped them set up the entire back office through the years. And we started with the tax division. We had a big IT division, assurance practice, and also a litigation and advisory practice. So over the years, their number of people just kept growing and I was a part of their team until 2021, leading the India offices until they got acquired by BDO. So the entire back office of MBF also joined BDO Rise, which was just starting out with their India offices around the same time. When we joined BDO only had an assurance presence in India, and they were starting to build out the tax practice. So we started helping them to build out their tax practice and their business service outsourcing practice. I went on to become their national tax service line lead. As a part of which I was growing the tax team. It was a remarkable growth because within a short span of 3 years, we grew the tax team to 1,000 people. And wow. overall, BDO Rise also has about 2,500 people in India now.
Now, and then tell us where you're at right now. So, and then you stepped away recently, right? And you created AccuEdge, or was AccuEdge already a business? And then you sort of, I know you're a partner in there now. Is that correct?
So basically, I've always been very entrepreneurial. Even when we were at MBAF, I was able to create a new business with them that was called AccuTax at that time. And I was a partner in that venture, which basically, we were servicing accounting and taxation services to clients out of India. And then recently, when I stepped away from my role at BDO, I started AccuEdge, which is a global offshoring firm, and that focuses on offshoring, managed offshoring teams, engaged offshore teams in the service lines of tax, assurance, as well as advisory. And this is kind of an extension of a family business that we already had, which was Apt Business Services. But that kind of focused on the Australia geography, and AccuEdge will be focusing on the US geography.
Understood. Now getting a little bit into why you're here, right? I mean, it's partially you've been in this space for a number of years. You've been able to really help build successful teams when it comes to, especially more on the captive side, right? So right now, a lot of these mid-sized, larger firms are really looking to invest and looking to take that step towards not just utilizing an outsourcing provider, but also they want ownership, right? They know that this is the step where they really need to invest in right now so that they can really handle their talent issues that will come up down the line, right? And to leverage just global workforces in general, right? So how important is it to find the right offshoring partnership, right? From a longevity perspective, from an integration perspective, like, and what are some of those aspects that firms need to look out for when they're looking to build out more of that captive side of things?
Yeah, Lawrence, that's a good question, right? Because offshoring no longer means just sending the lower end of the work off to India. The firms that are investing right now, they know that it is not only for cost efficiencies, they are really trying to address the skill shortage issue. So they have to be here for a long time, and the long-term success will really will depend if you're able to find a right offshoring partner where the relationships are really built on trust and creating values. There have to be open communication channels, and the partnership should be built on shared values. And you should be able to share common goals. So that is the key in having a long-term success.
So what's your, like, when it comes to yourself, right, and building out these large teams, leading these large teams, what's your approach to actually building and managing the global teams? Like, what should firm partners be thinking about, right, when they are looking to build out these global teams?
I think having worked both in the US and Indian geographies, I believe that leading a global team requires an appreciation for the cultural nuances of both sides. So my approach would really emphasize on bridging the cultural gap between the geographies and ensuring that both the sides have a great experience. There has to be transparent two-way communication, and you have to understand the local work practices, foster open communication, and continuously align to a shared common goal. It starts probably with a buy-in from the senior leadership and partners of the US team, where the focus is not only sharing repetitive tasks, but almost creating a parallel practice offshore. There has to be a clear career path and development opportunity for the offshore team, fostering a culture of learning and development and innovation, even at their offshore team centers.
Now, and you mentioned something before about the cost side of things, right? In that it's really going away from becoming a cost center, right? So when you say that, what do you mean by that? Because obviously there is a benefit of cost, right? When it comes to offshoring, especially, right? But where do you? It's not the driving factor that is in my conversation in a lot of cases now, right? I mean, firms are looking to really invest, but what should they look at? Think of the offshore center as compared to a cost center. Yeah.
I think originally when the idea of shoring started, 20 years back, the focus was only on the cost side of things because you could really build up a team in India. You could get your work done at about a third of the cost. But over the years, though the talent pool has really grown in India, the costs have also increased. It is still very cost efficient to have your teams in India, but that is not the only driving force. I think it is just the availability, the huge availability of the skilled workforce. That is the driving force that is driving all the accounting firms to create their centers in India. You should be able to partner with a firm that is able to customize a solution that works with your firm, and it helps you fuel the growth of your firm by riding on the success of your offshore team. It is no longer just about having repetitive tasks getting done here. It is moving from having a cost center to almost a profit center. You can create your centers of excellence within your offshore team, utilize them as research units, and even make them constantly as a profit unit.
So, and then what about when we're talking about this landscape in general, right? In the accounting industry, there's a huge amount of change, right? I mean, we're seeing lots of mergers and acquisitions, right? A lot of firms sort of getting together, right? We're seeing private equity getting into the mix, right? We're seeing a lot of change and a lot of development. When it comes to the offshoring landscape, right? I'm seeing firms doubling down. I'm seeing firms really investing. Where do you think, what have you seen over the past few years in terms of the change when it comes to the offshoring industry? And also, where do you see it going to over the next sort of 5-10 years?
I think the private equity interest recently into the accounting firms is going to be a boon for the offshoring industry, because with that, they can invest in the technology as well as talent offshore. Their focus is going to be in building process efficiencies, and that can be very well achieved by having a global team. And with the clear definition of scope and deliverables within the India's highly skilled and cost-effective talent pool, which includes CPAs, EAs, and chartered accountants as well, you can really induct them into your team and manage your offshore teams and create a lot of efficiencies within your firms. So that's where I see, most of your firms, it's not going to be a choice anymore, Laurence. Most of the firms will have some kind of a global talent pool. You're seeing it with the big four. I would say that almost 80% of the top 30 accounting firms in the United States have huge captive units. As long as you can find an offshoring partner that can customize solutions that align with your firm's growth goals, you can be very successful if you can find the right talent in India.
Now, Abhilasha, you've been in the US, right? You've worked with some of these larger organizations, right? When it comes to really building out the offshore teams, can you provide some advice to the listeners in terms of in stories of challenges that you've had, right? When it came to, you mentioned earlier, the cultural side of things that a lot of firms struggle with, right? That's a common area. Can you provide just a few stories and or specific areas that firms will find a challenge in, right? And how the ways that you've helped overcome those or seen ways that in order to do so?
I think, Laurence, the first challenge always comes in when your scope and your expectations of your offshore teams are not clearly defined. So it is not a place where, it's a magic wand where you think that you can dump all the work and it'll magically appear. The main driver of success is when you really invest in your offshore teams and there is a mind shift change. You do not treat them as third-party vendors, but you treat them exactly as your own team. COVID has taught us that, no longer are you required to have your team sit in the same office. So earlier on, we used to have a lot of technological challenges as well. But now that is not the case. You need to make sure that your offshore teams are on the same systems, they follow the same processes, and you're able to induct them in your team as you would do for your onshore teams. There has to be a seamless integration between the onshore and the offshore teams. There has to be a lot of open communication. Also, something like in India, the culture, the work culture is very hierarchical. So people are very, hesitant in the beginning to voice their opinions. Whereas in the United States, even an intern would not shy away in giving his opinion. So I think understanding those nuances, encouraging your team to speak up, and also letting them know that, it is okay to not agree. And it is more important than to communicate if you're falling behind. So such kind of little things to take care of, making sure that you familiarize them with your firm culture, give them their goals, give them a very clear growth path. And I think that is going to be a main driver of success. So what we've done is that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, I mean, when you talk about that, right, I mean, in terms of bringing them into your firm, right, all the collaboration side, really treating them like your team members, right, and getting them on the same page, right, knowing your goals as a firm and making sure they are aligned. What's a good way of doing it? What have you seen? Because again, I'm sure there was lots of testing as to ways of doing that, right, over the years to really find the best way that you were experienced. I'm sure there were different ways that they did it from an MBAF to a Big Four to a BDO, right? Mm-hmm. What did you feel like was one of the better ways of it being done?
I think the first thing that is very important is to have a continuity. So if there is, you're building trust, and if you have a good team, if you are continuously working on the same projects, they grow with you. So that is very important, rather than a third party vendor where you kind of giving them work, but you have a new person kind of working on it, on all your tasks. So you're never able to build a rapport or a relationship. Building a long-term trusting relationship with your team members in India is very important. The other thing that we saw was that in investing in constant communication, even outside of work. I know things get very busy during the busy times, but then, making sure that even in off season, you are constantly communicating with your teams. You're investing that time into learning and development. The same learning and development that is available to your onshore teams is also made available to your offshore teams. I'll give you an example that MBF used to always have a lunch and learn. And we, even if it was like, if it was 12 noon EST, it used to be around 9:30 p.m. in India. But then still in the beginning, we were expected to kind of attend those lunch and learns at that time. And over the years, what the firm did was they moved all their trainings to the morning. So their offshore teams could also be part of the live trainings at the same time. So making those adjustments, even the offshore teams usually will accommodate. You will see that your workforces in India will make sure that they are available for your calls. If you can induct them to your client teams, introduce them to your client teams, they will be happy to be a part of your client calls. Making those investments in the relationship goes a long way in maximizing the potential of your Indian teams and creating a lot of value.
So as we start to wrap up, I mean, you mentioned some very important points there around timings, right, in terms of what are the shifts that people are working, right? And I think this is somewhat of a shift that has gone on as well, where when I got into the space, like I saw a lot of outsourcing firms that were really being as flexible as possible in terms of making sure that there were people working the same shift timings as our US teams. And then as I sort of moved along and it got to the more recent years, I feel like there's been a much bigger push from outsourcing providers to say, guys, this isn't sustainable, right? We have burnout, right? We want to make sure that there's an understanding, right, that we can come onto calls and make sure that we're collaborating, but also there's more of an overnight shift so that you can help retain those people. There are going to be people that like to work the graveyard or the night shift, but in a lot of cases, that's not the norm. It's not for everybody, right? So I think there's been a bit of a push back from India, the Philippines, everywhere to say, we want to make sure our people want to work with us, want to stay with us long term. So we're now going to work XYZ hours instead, which is a better thing to do, right? And there has to be some collaboration there of that. So can you maybe give some advice to leaders when it comes to that, right? Because I think there needs to be a balance, right? And there also needs to be understanding of, okay, during the first initial phase of getting it started, maybe there needs to be more flexibility on one side than the other. right? But it's got to go both ways in a lot of cases. So what have you seen from that perspective as we start to wrap up?
Yes. As you very correctly mentioned, in the earlier years, and having been in this profession for almost 20 years now, that it was very important for us to work the graveyard shift because it was seen important that if there are any questions on either sides, whether your offshore team has it or the leaders in the US have questions, there has to be availability. But over the years, I think even the talent pool in India has become a lot more experienced and skilled. So earlier, we were very reliant on the onshore teams to impart the training. There weren't people skilled in US GAAP or US taxes available in India. But now you have people in India who are CPAs and EAs and who have been in this industry for over 2 decades. So that is why that requirement has diminished. And now you can flip it around and you can actually use the time zone difference to your advantage. You can create teams that can collaborate and work 24/7. As long as you have some derivative hours, you kind of create a process where you have a regular meeting with your offshore team where they can you are available for questions. And there are so many other channels that you can communicate on. There is Slack, there is Teams, there is Google Meets, whatever your organization is using. So, but that is enough for a couple of hours in the morning. So without any need, there is no requirement to have your teams work all night. While if you're working on the same projects, it makes more sense for them to kind of work all day their time and turn it to you, give a handoff, and have your teams work on it. So overall, I think most of the leaders in the US now understand that they have and having secondments on both sides, having the US leaders come into India to meet the teams, having the offshore teams be given the opportunity to go for short-term and long-term secondments to be able to work together will make this possible.
So what's the best way, Abhilasha, for people to reach you if they want to discuss this further, right? If they've got any questions, do you want to just share a little bit about where they can reach you? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah. I will also tell you, Laurence, that our main focus with AccuEdge is that we want to help the firms in the US source top talent in India and provide strategic advisory and compliance and analytics support, which gives them a platform to compete with firms that are not using offshoring. So the best way to reach out is you can send me an email anytime at aparikh@accuedgeinc.com. or reach out to me by phone or Teams, the ID of which I will provide here.
Okay, cool. No, I really appreciate it, Abhilasha. And again, everybody, it's extremely important, right, to consider all these aspects we spoke about today, whether it's the timing, whether it's the culture, right, of these offshore teams, to ensure that there is clear collaboration between your firm here domestically and offshore, right? We're seeing it more and more with firms that are investing in this, right? I think it's the way forward. This needs to be one of the approaches your firm has a plan for. It's not the only one, right? There needs to be a plan from the technology perspective and automation, right? There needs to be a plan for your domestic hiring needs as well, right? But one of these aspects is we need to catch up with this, right? When it comes to the offshoring, right? There's a big gap in terms of where firms can be and need to be, right? And there needs to be very clear goals in place in order to get there. So really appreciate having you on, Abhilasha. Appreciate you sharing that, your background, your experience, and sort of what you've been through from that perspective. So you're able to share advice around it. And really look forward to seeing everybody in the next episode of Business Beyond Borders. Thanks, Abhilasha.
Thank you, Laurence. It was a pleasure talking to you this morning.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Laurence Whittam, and it's been a pleasure bringing you impactful insights tailored for the modern CPA firm. Remember, the world of accounting is vast and ever evolving, and we're here to navigate it together. For more resources and episodes, don't forget to subscribe and reach out to our experts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your business and explore the limitless possibilities beyond borders.